Yng Nghymru mae gennym gynlluniau uchelgeisiol i greu coedwig genedlaethol a fydd yn rhedeg ar ledled y wlad trwy ecosystem gysylltiedig o goetiroedd hynafol a rhai newydd. Bydd y Coedwig Genedlaethol i Gymru yn perthyn i bob un ohonom ac o fydd i ni i gyd. Ein ni fydd i'w chreu, ein ni fydd i'w meithrin, ein ni fydd i'w choleddu am flynyddoedd i ddod. Bydd yn amddiffyn ein gwlad ac yn rhoi ffordd fwy cynaliadwy o fyw ar gyfer cenedlaethau'r dyfodol. Dyma'ch Coedwig Genedlaethol, byddwch yn rhan ohono. In Wales, we have ambitious plans to create a national forest which will run the length and breadth of the country through a connected ecosystem of ancient and new woodlands. The National Forest for Wales will belong to and benefit us all. It will be ours to create. It will be ours to cultivate. It will be ours to cherish for years to come. It will protect our country and provide a more sustainable way of life for our future generations. This is your National Forest. Be part of it.
That's me myself. First of all, that might help. Hello, Chymunedau, noswaith chi. Croeso, mae'r tywydd wedi newid yn sicr o'n croeso chi ar gyfer yn sesiwn, wel, yr ail sesiwn i drafod Coedwig Genedlaethol i Gymru ac i glywed eich safbwyntiau, cwestiynau a'ch lleisiau chi. Good evening to you. My name's Chris Jones. The weather's certainly turned, but there's a welcome to you all to the first day, the second session of this special event on the National Forest for Wales, of course, and to hear your views, your voices. Now, as I said, this is the second of 6 similar sessions that you can join over the course of the next 3 days. And from the registration of people, I'll see again, we do have a wide range of people from all fields in this virtual room. Felly diolch i chi gyd am gyfrestru ac wrth gwrs fydd y gyfle i chi gyfrannu yn Gymraeg ac yn Saesneg wrth gwrs. Felly, as Dion Warwick, I think, once sang, what's it all about? Well, I'm sure that most of you are aware by now that the First Minister, Mark Drakeford, of course, announced his intention to develop a National Forest for Wales in his manifesto commitments in 2018. And on the 12th of March last year, 2020, the First Minister officially launched the National Forest Programme. So, well, let's have our keynote address for this evening. Neges arbennig gan Llywodraeth Cymru fel rhywbeth o groeso i'r sesiwn hwyr yma. Please welcome live, yes, live, the Deputy Director for Land, Nature and Forestry at Welsh Government. I see you there smiling, Ceri Witchard.
Diolch, Chris. Noswaith dda a croeso. Welcome to this evening's session. It's great to see you all virtually here. At the National Forest, your voice and your views. As Chris said, I'm Coedwig Witchard, Deputy Director for Land, Nature and Forestry. I'm responsible for the team that is establishing the National Forest Programme. I just want to say a few words to set us off this evening about the programme itself and where we are. We're just coming to the end of our first year of the programme, which is really focused on establishing the programme, testing some ideas. We've had some demonstrator projects that we've run through the year, including a fund to support the creation of community woodlands and a scheme to support capacity building within our forestry sector in Wales. And we've also designated 14 exemplar sites from across the Welsh Government woodland estate that really showcase the objectives we're trying to achieve with the National Forest. And they're all over Wales, and that's really important that this is an all Wales vision. The First Minister is very keen to see a national forest that is for everyone in Wales. So that was really important to us. In the coming year, we will be extending the opportunity for woodlands beyond the Welsh Government woodland estate to also be awarded national forest status, recognising the time, the effort that people put into managing our woodlands, making them great places to visit. With some fantastic sites in Wales, and where nature can really flourish, connecting those ecosystems and really supporting our wildlife in Wales. We will be looking for those woodlands to demonstrate that same quality as we were aiming for with our own woodlands. So meeting all of those outcomes that have been discussed earlier today and will be discussed through the week. But we also know there are some woodlands out there that might not quite be at that standard, but would really like to play a part in the National Forest of the future. So we'll be making funding available to help those who manage these forests to raise those standards so that they do meet the National Forest aims and objectives and can join the brand of the National Forest of the future, which is really where we all want to be, with woodlands everywhere of the highest quality. So that's just a little bit about the programme, but really tonight's theme, which is what you've joined us for, is around the idea of trees and the environment. And we all know right now that climate change and crisis facing nature and biodiversity are top issues that we need to tackle, and we need to tackle soon, because otherwise it will be too late. And trees, well chosen and in the right place, have enormous potential to really make a contribution to our efforts in both these areas. So this evening you'll hear from some colleagues from across Welsh Government, who will talk about some of the approaches we're taking to modelling and gathering spatial data, helping to identify the right place for these trees and the right types of trees for achieving our different goals in these areas. And of course, to achieve our tree planting aims, we're working with people right across Wales, landowners, partners, communities, and of course those in our farming community who are really, really important to the success of this programme. So there'll also be an opportunity to hear from the team working on the future farming policy in Wales. But tonight is really about your views. So those presentations, like the ones earlier, if you joined us this afternoon, will be short, sharp, little think pieces, really just to get you thinking about what you feel around this programme. And then there'll be plenty of time for you to discuss, share your views, because that is what this event is about, hearing from you. So that's all I wanted to say. I really hope you enjoy this evening's discussion. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you and your views. Thank you for joining us tonight. Diolch, and I'll hand you back to Chris. Thank you.
Great. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Ceri. Thank you so much. Now, if you are into Twitter and you like tweeting, as my mother says, you can use a special hashtag. It's National Forest Wales, neu yn Gymraeg, wrth gwrs, ac yn ni'n treol wneud y digwyddiadau mewn mor ddwyieithog a phosib, hashtag Coedwig Genedlaethol Cymru. So please, by all means, put some tweets and pictures and comments on Twitter whenever you can. Felly, beth sydd o'n blaenau ni heno a dros y tridiau nesaf, wel, y sicr fori a dydd Gwener. What's in store for us? Well, the aim of the event over the next 3 days, as Ceri alluded to, is twofold: to focus on the views of the people of Wales on the development of the National Forest, so the people, that's you obviously, whilst also exploring the benefits of woodlands and trees for all, demonstrating how valuable trees actually are from a social, economic and environmental perspective. And so over the course of the 3 days, we've got themed sessions lined up focusing on these benefits. And as I said earlier on, funnily enough, they actually call it Trees and Communities, Trees and the Economy, and Trees for the Environment. And that's the topic, of course, we are focusing on this evening. Now, bydd y dair thema yn cael ei darparu ddwywaith yn ystod yr wythnos, yn ystod amseroedd gwahanol, ac i alluogi gymaint o phobl i gweld nhw. Wrth gwrs, a diolch i bawb nath gymryd rhan yn y sesiwn rhwydweithio prynhawn yma hefyd gyda Glenda. All three themes will be delivered twice during the course of the week and at different times to enable as many people as possible to have access to them. In addition to these sessions, there was a great informal networking workshop this afternoon run by our colleague Glenda Jones. So thank you if you attended that. Now, for each of these sessions, again, please bear with me, there are 3 parts. Rhan 1, part 1, which is where we are now, of course, an information sharing session with updates on Welsh Government policy and showcase items, which will be using the Zoom webinar link. Felly, y sesiwn rhannu gwybodaeth ar newyddion diweddara ynglyn â'r prosiect yma. Wrth gwrs, rhan 2, part 2, will be a discussion session, and we'll be accessing that through a Zoom meeting link that you receive in the breakout conversation room. Don't worry, we'll explain that as we go along. It's part of the event box, of course. Felly, sesiwn drafod. A wedyn yn ola, rhan 3, part 3, it's a panel Q&A, which I'll be facilitating later on when we reconvene here in the webinar in the main event box room. Now, I'm hoping you'll have some questions for the panels please use the Q&A facility here on Zoom as much as you can. I'm sure you're all familiar with raising the hand and the chat button on Zoom, of course. It's funny, isn't it? We'd never even heard of Zoom a year ago, this March last year, but there we are. Felly sesiwn holi ag ateb fydd y drydydd. Ac wrth gwrs, mae yna wybodaeth am ein siaradwyr ni. They are biographies of the contributors, synopses of their various sessions in the showcase rooms. There's also a room about the networking session and the Q&A room where you can find biographies of the panelists every day. So feel free to browse these rooms when you can. And the main room here is being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded, as will the Q&A session later on, but the breakout discussion groups won't actually be recorded. So the Eventbox, well, it's a superb platform and it's very easy to navigate once you get to know it. However, if you need support regarding any of this, or you get stuck somewhere, please don't panic, don't be embarrassed, don't delay, go to the lobby of Eventbox. If in doubt, always go to the lobby of Eventbox. You can email, it's info@eventbox.wales, and Eventbox, of course, is BOCS, the Welsh version of box. So that's info@eventbox.wales. Adam is our resident technical expert, and I'm sure he'll help you if he can. Right, nawr, cyn bo hir, newn ni wrando ar 3 prosiect sy'n mynd I roi syniad I chi o'r fath o waith sy'n mynd ymlaen, wrth gwrs, ar hyn o bryd. So we'll have today's 3 showcases for you, this evening's 3 showcases, and they'll illustrate work that's currently happening. But firstly, yn gynta, let's turn to Welsh Government and a member of the National Forest team to give us an overview of development so far. Felly, rowch groeso, sgwylwch yn dda, please welcome the Head of Forestry Reform at Welsh Government, John Travis.
Diolch, Chris. Noswaith dda. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give a very quick introduction to the background of the National Forest Programme and where we are at the moment in the programme. Some of you might have joined us this morning and will have heard some of this morning, so I'll keep it very quick, but it will be hopefully useful context, particularly for those joining us for the first time this evening. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the National Forest Programme was launched this time last year, as Chris said, and the ambition is to create a network of high quality woodland which extends the length and breadth of Wales and which delivers the many benefits which we know come from woodlands through both planting new trees and restoring existing woodlands. Ministers want the National Forest to be something which benefits the environment and helps tackle climate change, which improves the health and well-being of people who enjoy it, and which also supports our economy in Wales. If you could go to the next slide, please. So what will the National Forest look like? Well, at a local level, the National Forest will be made up of new and existing woodlands in both urban and rural areas. And it'll be made up of a mix of woodlands, both public woodlands from the Welsh Government estate, but also woodlands owned by others. At a regional level, as I've said, it will be a connected network which is connected over time across the length and breadth of Wales. At a national level, the National Forest will be a long-term programme which can be a catalyst for new woodland creation and for better management of our existing woodlands. And over time, we hope it will form a Wales-wide asset in a similar way to the Wales Coast Path and other national assets in Wales. And globally, we want the National Forest to be something which attracts people to Wales and helps Wales play its role in tackling climate change. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the National Forest isn't just about tree planting, but about seeking to enjoy the full potential that woodlands can offer. And for that to happen, it needs to involve people throughout Wales. And one of the ways that you can get involved this week is through the People's Collection. So the People's Collection for Wales seeks to preserve and celebrate the history of Wales by collecting unique stories from everyday people. And they've opened a National Forest collection to capture people's memories and feelings about woodlands in Wales. So we would encourage you this week to visit that and have a look at the collection and add and contribute your memories, whether that's through pictures or films or poetry or some other means. There should already be some content there, including from our First Minister, Mark Drakeford. So do have a look at that and the links in the slide there. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I've talked briefly about what the National Forest will be, and now briefly to touch on how we want to get there. With input over the last year from lots of people across Wales, we've identified 6 outcomes that we're focused on the National Forest delivering. And they're set out on this slide. So we want good quality, well-designed and well-managed woodlands that are resilient to make up the National Forest. We want those woodlands to be accessible to people and to encourage people to engage with and enjoy the woodlands. We want local communities to be involved in the woodlands in lots of different ways. We want the woodland to be connected over time to bring the benefits that brings for both biodiversity and people. We want dynamic, multi-purpose woodlands and trees that deliver a range of benefits. And finally, we want woodlands that demonstrate learning and take advantage and contribute to the latest research and innovation. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as Ceri said in her introduction, we've already named 14 National Forest exemplar sites across the country. And you can see those on the slide here. Those are all Welsh Government owned, and as we've said this week, over the next year, we will be open to applications for non-Welsh Government owned woodlands to be part of the National Forest, including funding available to help those woodlands achieve National Forest standard. So we hope that woodland and landowners will start to think about how their woodlands can contribute to the National Forest. We also have a community woodlands scheme, which is open at the moment to support the development of community woodlands, and that will be open for applications until next year. And later this year, we'll be consulting on a longer term delivery plan for the National Forest. And Erika will be coming back to that later in the evening, so I won't say more about it now, but we've developed some strategic maps which we want people to start engaging with to think about how we can deliver that long-term National Forest for Wales. But for now, I hope that gives you a useful introduction to our plans for the National Forest, and I'll hand back over to Chris. Diolch.
Thank you, John. Okay, well, as I said, we'd like to ask our 3 special guests this evening to present their individual showcases. And gynta, first we have another John Westlake. And John Westlake is Head of Policy, Land Management Reform, Welsh Government. I think I've got your title right, John, so over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. As Chris says, I'm the Head of Policy for the Land Management Reform team, basically engaged in developing post-European Union support for farmers and for agriculture. We've been consulting on this for 2 or 3 years now. I'm not going to talk about the entire program because it's pretty big and it would take far too long, but I'm going to zoom in on the role of trees and woodland in the proposals that we have, and they are all still proposals rather than anything definite. So we say trees have several important roles. So they sequester carbon, which is a big deal. Welsh Government has a policy of decarbonising or helping all sectors to decarbonise, and agriculture is no different to any other in that respect. Slightly tougher to decarbonise perhaps than some others, but tree planting has a significant role to play. The UK Climate Change Committee has given us quite a testing target for new planting in Wales, and we also have to bring the majority of farm woodland into management. Now, at one and the same time, I think that's a challenge for us, but it's also a huge opportunity. Trees are also quite a big deal for us in the more, I guess, purely environmental sense. We see them as a very useful way of creating connected habitats across a landscape. They're also quite important in an agricultural sense. We see big opportunities for agroforestry and the incorporation of trees into fields, both in terms of shelter, but also in terms of nutrient cycling. Trees offer opportunities that other plants can't provide. And lastly, we're really interested in the social aspects of trees and woodlands. So we know that a very effective way of dealing with something called PM 2.5, nanoscale particulate emissions that are involved in premature death and respiratory illness in Wales, can be intercepted very well by planting trees in the right place. And one of the next presenters and his team have been working with us on locational data to work out where that right place is. So we're working with farmers to define how we support the planting of all these trees, how we locate them. As Ceri said, the right tree in the right place is a very important issue for us. We don't want to repeat what happened in the 1950s and 1960s here in Wales, where whole farms got planted up with conifers, which have a significant use within the construction industry. They're one of the ways of decarbonising construction by increasing the amount of timber in woodlands. But we say we want multifunctional woodlands. They should be environmentally appropriate. They should be capable of producing timber if that's what the landowner wants to do, but they may well have other far more important uses, like the public health ones that I mentioned. We're also very interested in encouraging farmers that live in the peri-urban areas, so around our major cities and major towns, to develop woodlands, whether they're linear woodlands or large-scale woodlands, which would enable people to access green space without having to get in a car and drive to it. For social reasons, for mental health reasons, and indeed for physical health reasons, access to that sort of space is really important, and we want to encourage that wherever we can. So we think that we've got a lot to contribute to the National Forest, but of course it will be up to individual farmers to decide whether or not they want their new woodlands or well-managed woodlands to become part of that National Forest. And so one of the reasons I'm here tonight is to start that dialogue, to hear more myself about the National Forest and make sure that we can play our part in joining up. So I'm sorry that I didn't have any slides and you've had to stare at my face for 5 minutes, but you know, that's basically what I was going to say. So I'm going to hand back to Chris now, but I welcome questions in the next sessions. Thank you very much. Yes,
thank you, John. And I know you will be with us later on in the Q&A panel. And sometimes it's easier not to have slides, John, as we found out this morning. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. As I say, we will see you later on in the Q&A. As I alluded to earlier on, there is information about all our speakers, and presenters on the Event Box lobby page. Felly nesa, eto o Llywodraeth Cymru, again from Welsh Government, we have Lloyd Harris, and Lloyd is the Modelling and Monitoring Programme Management Lead from Welsh Government. So Lloyd, I can see you ready there.
Hi everyone. I'm Lloyd Harris and I work in the Strategic Evidence Unit in the Welsh Government. And today I'm going to take you through some of the land use modelling and public goods modelling we're doing to support the National Forest, as well as some other policy areas in the Welsh Government. I'm going to take you through some of the outcomes we've already got, and then also some of the relevance that modelling has to the National Forest for Wales programme. Next slide, please. So the Strategic Evidence Unit that I work in has a role where we kind of are a liaison between research organisations and experts and then Welsh Government environmental policy. And for modelling, this is predominantly done in liaison with something called the Environment and Rural Affairs Modelling and Monitoring Programme, or ERAMP for short, which is a 5-year programme funded by the Welsh Government and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. And what ERAMP basically does is bring together 20 partners and with various experts representing them from different research organisations from across Wales and the UK, including various universities, forest research, the Office of National Statistics, and others. And I'll show you some of the modelling outputs that they're achieving in a moment. Can we go to the next slide, please? So basically, first of all, I'll go through what is modelling, and modelling in its simplest form tries to predict future trends and outcomes based on the current available data and predicted future scenarios. And at the moment, it's probably most famously used in COVID-19 modelling, where we can see chief medical officers, and we can see politicians at the daily briefing showing the worst and best case scenarios of what will happen in the pandemic in terms of cases, in terms of hospitalizations, and then lots of different scenarios in between that. And what they've done for this is they've used the best available data and the best predicted future scenarios to try and determine what that is. And then what they can do is look at how various different interventions, for example, lockdowns, can help mitigate and get us away from that worst case scenario and towards that best case scenario. And what we're doing something similar with ERAMP and to do with the environment, where we're looking at how external factors, for example, climate change, for example, the new trade scenario that we find ourselves in by leaving the EU, and how they have influenced our land use and how they might, the general trends of how they might affect Welsh land use and then affect the public goods that we rely on from our environment. Next slide, please. So in ERAMP, we've got two different modelling platforms. We've got the integrated modelling platform, the IMP, and we've got Quick Start, which I'll go on to talk about in a minute. And basically what we've got is in ERAMP with the IMP, it rapidly explores the effects of policy and management interventions on the farm viability, land use and public goods in Wales. And what we can see is that we have a scenario. So for example, as I said, we have a difference in trade because of leaving the EU, and we can see how that influences land use in Wales. And the IMP looks specifically at agricultural land use. So it'll say, in this scenario, are this agricultural land use still viable? If not, will it go to a different agricultural land use? Will it go to a different land use, e.g. forestry? And then using that, we can get all that together, all these changes in land use, and we can look at these coloured boxes, which are models at the bottom, and see how this influences public goods. For example, air quality, for example, biodiversity. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So the IMP is currently being developed and is being used for looking at the implications of our new trade deal with the EU. As John mentioned earlier, we're working with the Sustainable Farm Scheme and looking at how the various different interventions that we're thinking of bringing into that are going to affect Wales land use, as well as looking at our net zero target for 2050 from the CCC report. But those outputs aren't currently published yet, they're still in development. So I'm going to show you some outputs that we did in 2019 with the Quick Start, which was a more rapid modelling tool to kind of aid Welsh Government's policy response to Brexit trade scenarios. It's a bit less robust. It can show us general trends, but it can't show us that specific data as it is less robust. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we have some outputs from the Quick Start modelling. And it's important for me to note from the outset, these are only showing trends. They're not predictions for exactly what will happen in the future. We can't obviously predict human behaviour, and there's many other things. They're mostly done on economic trends and what we but they're useful to see generally what might happen. And so what Quick Start did is it modelled three different trade scenarios. So we've got EU deal, we've got no deal, and then we've got the multi-free trade agreement, which is kind of like no deal, but you've also got trade deals with places like New Zealand, Australia, and the USA. And what we can see here is that in a no deal scenario, you've got a lot of grey area, which means there's not too much change in land use. And I should say it's looking at agricultural land use change. So there's not too much change in the land use across Wales. There's a little bit of change away from the yellow dots, which are sheep farms moving to other land use. And in the southeast, we can see a little bit of a move from grazing agricultural to dairy. And then you contrast that to the no deal scenario, and you can see that we've got a massive change as things like tariffs start to come in. We can't trade with the EU as freely. And you can see that in and across mid Wales and the uplands, we've got a move away from agriculture, and then in kind of the more productive agricultural lands of, say, Pembrokeshire, the southeast and northeast of Wales, we've got a move from sheep farming to things like dairy and cattle, as in the new market, they're more economically viable as businesses, whereas the tariffs on, say, sheep carcasses make them less economically viable. And then we look at the multi-free trade agreement, and again, now you've got these tariffs, but also you may have products being imported from various other places at a lower cost. So you see that agriculture takes a big hit in this scenario, and we've got not only farms moving out of agriculture across mid Wales, but also start going into the other areas of Wales. And once we've seen these trends of land use change and move out of agriculture, we can then say, okay, well, in the MFTA scenario, what's going to happen to this land? And we start to look at things such as tree planting. So in this table on the right, if we look at the MFTA scenario, we can say, okay, well, we've got roughly this amount of land coming out of agriculture. Based on spatial data and based on Welsh Government's current woodland policies, how much trees can we plant? And we can see it's somewhere between 20 and 40% is what is predicted to be planted. As I said, it is a prediction only. Next slide, please. Once we've then looked at land use change and what might happen, we can then start to look at how this affects public goods and how this affects us in Wales. And I've just picked greenhouse gases as an example. But if we look at the EU deal scenario, we can see there's not too much change. The colours are quite light, and where this would be predicted as there hasn't been too much change to the land use. We can see there's a slight decrease in greenhouse gases in across mid Wales, where we've got a slight move away from agriculture, and then that area in southeast Wales that I mentioned has got a slight increase in greenhouse gas emissions as we've moved to cattle and dairy, which obviously emit more greenhouse gases. And then we contrast that to the no deal scenario, where we've got these vibrant big colours showing that there's big changes in greenhouse gases because of the land use change. In and across mid Wales again, we can see that there's a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, but where we've now got this intensification of cattle and dairy agriculture, we've got big increases in greenhouse gas emissions. And this can obviously have massive effects on the populations in those areas. And now we look at the odd one, which is the MFTA, where we've moved away from agriculture in a lot of in the scenario. And what we can see is we've got a decrease in greenhouse gases across Wales. Now, although this may look like it's quite good for the Welsh environment, what this doesn't show is that we may be exporting our carbon footprint to other areas. So if we're importing, say, lamb products from New Zealand, as opposed to Wales, then that would obviously carry a wider carbon footprint. Next slide, please. This is obviously a kind of high level look at modelling, and modelling is a very complex scientific tool. But I think it's important now to look at how we're going to use modelling for the National Forest. And so ERAMP is going to use the IMP to support the National Forest through a series of modelling activities. And we're going to identify where we can get value for money and where we can secure the best public goods and social values for the people of Wales. We'll take an integrated approach of this and look at where we're planting the National Forest in line with other Welsh Government priorities. So we've already mentioned agriculture, but also things such as biodiversity, such as our cultural heritage and our employment sector, and also in relation to our national priorities and international obligations, so things like the Paris Agreement. I've already mentioned net zero emissions. We can also start to then monetize these public goods. So for example, with air quality, we can look at, say, the health benefits that brings and how cost saving that is for the NHS. And ultimately, basically what we want to do is try and get the right tree in the right place for the greatest benefit for the people of Wales. And looking at those 6 outcomes that Ceri mentioned earlier, making sure we achieve all them. And modelling can help evidence and inform the policy team that's developing the National Forest to ensure that each tree is suitable and that the land use we use is bringing out the best for the people of Wales. And as John said, I'll be in the Q&A session, so happy to take any questions then. Thank you.
Got me in a ways there. Good. Okay. Ewn ni mlaen nesaf, gewn ni un ola. We'll move swiftly on, if I may, to the third and final showcase. It's entitled Spatial Strategy Approaches, and it's presented by the big boss herself. We saw Erika Dawson-Davies this morning, and she's with us again this evening. And Erika is, of course, the head of the National Forest Programme. So, Erika.
Hello, croeso noswaith da. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this evening's session. It's really great to be with you here today. And I'm going to speak to you this evening, building on the presentation that Lloyd's just presented and John, just to explain some of our thoughts behind the spatial strategy approaches. Now, when you see that, it sounds a little bit woolly, I have to say. But when we get on to the next slide, it'll start becoming more apparent. Now, we've been doing a lot of work, and as Lloyd said, we've been working with the ERAMP team and with Forest Research to pull together the evidence pack behind the National Forest. That evidence pack's available online, and I can post the link up later. It's quite a detailed document, and it really is, it sets out the case for change for the National Forest and looks at lots of different elements, from climate change mitigations through to biodiversity through to the social benefits of the National Forest. Building on that, we had a PhD student working with us for the last 3 months, and her work was to look at how we make the connections for the National Forest. So how do we look at where the National Forest, where it's going, what it looks like? That's one of the biggest questions we get asked. Where is it? And just to start looking at that in more detail and more depth, Jenny Knight, who was our PhD student, she started putting together some story maps, which pulled together lots of different layers of data, looking at the work that was done through the ERAMP team, and starting to look on a local level right up to national level of how the national forests can be organised. Now, the next slides are really indicators and absolutely just ideas, and we really want your views on these, just on how the national forest can be organised, how we feel as a starting point we can move forward from the exemplar sites, and as Ceri mentioned in her keynote speech, how we can pull in non-Welsh Government woodland estate woodlands into the national forest, and how we use those outcomes to make sure that we have good quality resilient woodlands. Next slide please, Adam. So organisational idea number one, this was the original thoughts behind the National Forest. This is a connected ecosystem in a more of a trail type approach from one end of Wales to the other, north to south or south to north. Really simple. It's at the moment we've literally just joined together the exemplar sites with the ancient woodland sites that we already have. And on the map you can see the coastal path already depicted. Now, one of the ambitions for the National Forest is that it becomes an asset for Wales, akin to the coastal path. And this scenario really does look at that type of thing. I mean, the squiggle doesn't mean anything. It's not depicting anything. It's just an approach. Next slide, please, Adam. Idea number two is more of a circuitry approach. So this is for a way around Wales, again pulling in areas of the coastal path into more terrestrial areas and joining up with areas such as the ANOBs that are marine, so Pembrokeshire, Anglesey, and maybe specific site-specific areas like the Llyn Peninsula, where there might be more specific activity undertaken. But again, it's just an idea of how the connections can be made. Slide number 3, please, Adam. Now, this approach is what we're calling the hub and spoke approach. This uses the area statement work that's been undertaken by Natural Resources Wales. And this actually uses maybe exemplar sites or existing woodlands as hubs. And then the connections are made from a place-based approach from the communities, from public and private landowners joining those areas together. And as Lloyd alluded to, the modelling work will really help shape this idea. And we'll start to look at where planting could be incentivised, for example, or where the best planting and the best type of trees are for certain areas. So all of this work sort of joins together. You can see a real narrative and a story going through all of this. They're the three very, very high level ideas. And as I say, there isn't any prescriptive route map on these. They really are organisational approaches to how we can start shaping and making those connections. And hopefully now with the next round of funding, looking at non-Welsh Government woodland estate, we can start to join the dots, or for the National Forest to become the glue of joining these areas together and start making the connections in different ways, whether it be through green infrastructure, ecosystem, and just looking at how those connections can be made and what's needed in certain place-based areas. So I hope that gives you a flavour. We're going to have some breakout groups in a minute where we can discuss all of this and start talking through these ideas and gaining your views on those. And then we'll come back for a Q&A later where we can discuss in more detail. Thank you, Chris. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Erika. Thank you so much. So 3 valuable showcases there, and all 3, Lloyd, John and Erika, again, will be on the panel, as you said, for the questions later on this evening. Well, I'm not quite sure, it'll be 8-ish, won't it really? And as I mentioned, all the showcases, the biogs and the content for the Q&A, as well as photos, etc., are available to peruse at your leisure on Eventbox, this wonderful new platform. So try and make the most of it all. Okay, well, I'm hoping that after seeing those showcases, you will have some questions ready for the panelists. So don't forget to jot them down on the Q&A facility here on Zoom, of course. Don't forget to tweet. The hashtag, again, is National Forest Wales, neu yn y Gymraeg, Coedwig Genedlaethol Cymru. Felly, na fe am y tro, amser am goffi bach neu diol bach, dwi'n meddwl. Let's stop for a quick tea or coffee or drink of water, whatever you'd like. After the break, now we are going into part 2, okay, of the session. and this is your opportunity to have your say. So listen carefully, as I say. Please go back to the lobby in event box. So look for the word lobby. Look for I'm going to breakout conversations, neu sesiwn sgwrsio yn y Gymraeg. Click onto the appropriate link. I hope I'm getting this right, James. Click onto the appropriate link. It's the second one down that says 1850, and I think the word now will appear as well. So that's 1850 and now. Then click on the green box on the left that says click here to join the Zoom meeting. So once again, go back to the lobby, go into breakout conversations, look for the appropriate link. So it's the 1850 one, obviously, and then click on that, and then click on the green box that will just appear on the screen on the left that says click here to join the Zoom meeting, and we'll reconvene, well, in about 10 minutes. Now, during the break, you'll be able to watch some more films, which will be on a loop in the lobby itself. If you scroll down to the bottom of the lobby screen, we start with a special film by Griffith Jones, Casgliad y Werin, People's Collection, as well as a video by Eich Coedwig too. We saw that first thing this morning. So see you in 10 minutes. So any problems, let us know ASAP. The time now is, what are we? We are, it's, okay, let's make it just before 10 to then, please. So just before 10 to. Okay, diolch. Okay, right, I think we're back with everyone. Croeso nôl i chi. Alarm says, see you on the other side. Yes, this is the other side. So diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am gymryd rhan at yr holi ac ateb nesaf felly. So this is the third and the final part of this session today. As I said, the second of 6 sessions. We've got 2 tomorrow and 2 on Friday as well. And we've had some quite lively discussions, some wonderful content and comments and opinions so far. Now it's time for you to ask these taxing questions. We have literally about 20 minutes, which is great. So we've already met our panel, of course. If it's okay, I'll ask all 3 of you to quickly introduce yourselves again, please, what your name, what your role is. So we'll start with, obviously, Erika.
Hello, Erika Dawson-Davies, Head of the National Forest Programme.
Okay, and John Westlake.
Hi, John Westlake. I'm the Head of Policy for Land Reform.
Okay, and finally, Lloyd, please.
Lloyd Harris, working in the Strategic Evidence Unit in the Welsh Government. Okay,
good. Thank you, guys. Right, so please use the chat, use the Q&A for the questions, please. I haven't got any coming in at the moment. I'm sure you've all got these amazing taxing questions for these 3 wonderful people. I do have one actually, panelist, and maybe let's go straight to Erika, if you don't mind, Erika. How a question a lot of people are probably asking: how was it funded? Simple as that. How was it funded?
Okay, that's a really good question. At the moment, we're lucky enough to have budgets in year, so that's really fabulous, just to test and trial different approaches. And then we'll be looking at a consultation in the autumn winter of this year, where we'll be looking at longer term funding and delivery models. So I think there's a question in the Q&A section that says, how long will the consultation period, that's next, so it'll be coming out for winter time this year, and it'll be about a 12-week, normally they're 12 weeks, so that's how long the consultation period will be. But we're actually in consultation and stakeholder engagement phase now from a programme point of view, and this is the start of the stakeholder engagement with this amazing event over the next 3 days, and there'll be a lot more of these happening as we go through and things start developing. So please keep looking at the web pages, keep looking at Twitter and all the feeds and all those things.
Sure. Thank you, Erika. If everybody else can make sure that their mics are on mute, then please, I can hear a few dogs or something. So, okay, the questions are coming in now. Thank you, Erika. I did see that how long the consultation period would be, which, okay. Sian Howley does have a question. I'm not sure if this is for John or maybe Lloyd. Is there a current map an actual map of all the forests across Wales? Is there a current map of all the forests across Wales? Wow, okay. Anybody?
I'll answer that one.
Right.
Yes, up to a certain point, obviously, if there was a forest planted in the last month, there might not be on the, it might have to take a little bit of time to get into the maps, but ultimately, yes, we do. We work closely in the Welsh Government with things like Ordnance Survey to get the most up-to-date maps of everything, including forestry. Whether that is publicly available, I'd have to go and ask and come back.
No, that's fine. And since we're with you then, Lloyd, a gentleman, Hayden,
Yes.
has said that both John and Lloyd have made direct reference to agricultural emissions.
Yep.
Emissions. I'm not quite sure what the question is, but do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, the reason I made reference to agricultural emissions with the modelling was because that's the modelling we've done so far, and the outputs that I shown were to do with kind of the Brexit trade scenario, specifically on agriculture. Obviously, the modelling we'll do for the National Forest will be a bit more forestry related, and we'll look at hopefully emissions reduction due to woodland planting.
Okay, excellent. John, somebody's asked me then, are there any large landowners that are on board to become new forest? How much crown land is in Wales? That's an interesting question. How much crown land is there in Wales?
I think you better ask Erika about the large landowners, to be candid. Crown land's an interesting concept. They own everything below the high tide mark, I know that.
Okay,
but not sure.
Erika, let me put you on the spot then. Do we know?
As I say, we're in consultation mode, and we are consulting with everybody that we can think of. So from landowners to community groups, as we spoke to this morning, public sector, third sector, we are talking to everybody. So it's our plans with this whole consultation phase to get everybody's opinions, everybody's voices, and start talking to everybody. We have a Woodland Strategic Advisory Panel, and COM4 sit on that panel, and they're also on the National Forest Task and Finish Group. So COM4 is the sector body for forestry. So yeah.
Good, thank you. Somebody's asked me, can I join the sessions tomorrow? Yes, you can. If you go on to the event box lobby, there are details there how to register for tomorrow and for Friday as well, if you like. John, then let's come back to you then, if we may. I'm hoping you can, so where are we? Morton, Grace, I'm not sure. In our group earlier, we touched on integrating farming and forestry. Do any of the panelists have a view on how this could be achieved?
Yeah. Yes, well, I do. We've done a lot of work with stakeholders on how we might achieve this. It depends on how you define forestry, I guess. How can you integrate trees into farming systems is probably a better question. Many farms have woodland. Generally speaking, although I know this is not always true, that woodland tends to be neglected. It's not managed as a forester or a woodland manager would understand it. So I think one of our first steps is to start an outreach program, perhaps, that starts explaining to farmers why woodlands should be managed, what the benefits to them and to the environment are of managing those woodlands appropriately, and to step on from there to start talking to them about how trees and woodlands can also provide other benefits to their farming enterprise. In our group earlier, I was talking about the kind of Scandinavian system, which is a bit different. Basically, farmers farm while the weather's good, and then when the weather's not good, they go and look after their woodland because you can get shelter in there and you can still do work that you wouldn't be able to do in the snowy winters in Scandinavia. Now, I'm not suggesting that's where we go here, but there's certainly more to be said and more to be done about the value of trees to farming enterprises. And for us, it's part of that whole approach to regeneration, improving soil health, storing up carbon, providing shade for animals, which in drought summers is becoming an increasingly important thing.
Okay. Let me stay with farming then, John,
Yep.
if you don't mind. We've got a question in the chat button here. I'm keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A here. How will farmers be able to make a living in the interim years on woodland and forestry creation using carbon capture and corporate offsetting?
Now, well, I'll tell you what I think.
Okay.
One of the things that we're looking at is whether we pay farmers for the environmental outcomes, the public goods that Lloyd referred to earlier, rather than the current mode of support. And one of those public outcomes is clearly carbon capture. So we're doing some work at the moment to try and derive a social value per unit of emissions avoided or unit of carbon or carbon equivalent that's sequestered. On the basis that that's an annual year-on-year increase in the sequestration, which would mean potentially an annual year-on-year payment for the carbon that is sequestered. That's one approach, and that's really related to the kind of woodland that we envisage on farms, which is mostly native species, probably with a strong biodiversity and carbon sequestration thread running through them. Corporate offsetting, it works. Is it McDonald's that have just signed a big deal with Australian beef farmers for the carbon that they're storing in their soils? It's quite complex because you have to be able to evidence that you're actually doing this. It's not enough just to say, yeah, there's carbon in the soil. But I think where there's a lot of interest actually is in the potential for carbon trading. And that, I think, will become increasingly important.
Okay. The questions are coming thick and fast here now. Erika, if you don't mind, I can come back to you for two questions, if you don't mind. First of all, just a clarification, I suppose. What is the difference between forest and woodland?
This is a favourite. It's kind of what you want it to be. The traditional definition of a forest, we could go into that. It was a hunting vista. It was woodland with wide open spaces for hunting. Really, it really is down to what you want it to be defined as. You could say one's more commercial, one isn't, one's certain hectareage, one isn't. There are technical definitions, but we use it interchangeably at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm staying with you then. Andrew Thomas is saying he's 110% behind the National Forest of Wales. But I'm sorry for asking this question, but is there any strong opposition to the project, and what is being done about getting the nation on board?
Oh, I'm going to turn that on its head a bit, if that's okay. Thank you very much for being 100. It's fantastic, and the amount of support we've had just tonight shows, the amount of enthusiasm for this programme, and really, the discussion we had was fantastic. But yeah, we are. This is the whole stakeholder engagement part. This is getting everybody's views. It really is, and views can be they don't all have to be positive. We want to hear people's challenges and issues and have really open discussions about them as well. So yeah, as you see tonight, the principle and the concept is really well received. So yeah, happy to hear everybody's views on that.
Good. Okay. I'm going to go to Lloyd now, if I may. Lloyd, Hannah's asking, is Lloyd modelling the multi-benefits such as carbon sequestration and flood relief and well-being access to give the best place for forest under multiple benefits? That is one heck of a question.
Yes.
Lloyd?
So that's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah, the beauty of the integrated modelling platform is that it will be able to integrate all these different benefits and not just the kind of classic environmental ones of climate, of carbon sequestration. So on that chain that I presented earlier, where you've got the bottom half of it for the IMP, they all kind of interact with each other And so as you've got a change of land use, you can then see the carbon sequestration, the recreational benefits, and natural capital accounting, as I mentioned earlier, gets into that. And then air quality benefits, biodiversity benefits, or disbenefits that may occur. And what we're hoping to do is that then they can all interlink, and we can see how to prioritize certain areas or deprioritize other areas within that.
Okay. Thank you, Lloyd. Hayden Evans, the difficulty I have as a farm is that under the IPCC accounting, the carbon sequestration for my trees, oh my word, goes to, is that LULUCF, which still leaves my farm as an emitter and no account of my hedgerow or woodland management. So this is obviously out of my comfort zone. So let's start with that again. The difficulty I have as a farm is under the IPCC accounting, the carbon sequestration for my trees goes to, I think that's LULUCF, which still leave my farm as an emitter and no account of my hedgerow or woodland management. Wow. John?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so very, very quickly then, in the greenhouse gas inventory, which is a multinational, in fact, worldwide inventory for countries to consider how they're performing in terms of their emissions and emissions reduction programs, is broken up into things that most people regard as inconvenient because they do things that span different parts of the inventory. However, as I said in the chat to Hayden, we don't think the inventory is the right way to look at what's actually happening on a farm. It's a national tool, it's not an individual tool. Far better for us to use some form of carbon footprinting tool so that we can track change over time and reward the positives. So LULUCF, by the way, land use change and forestry sector of the inventory. But that's too hard to say, so everybody calls it LULUCF.
I knew that, John, that's fine.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Erika, I think we had this question this morning, and lots of people have been asking this really, and we've been talking about the sort of the attraction of this amazing wood and the tourism benefits and whatever. But someone's asking, Peter John asking, will we be creating areas of wildwood, i.e. unmanaged and left to nature? Is that one of the ideas?
It's an idea. It's unmanaged. It's an interesting term. Managed is an interesting term because some people actually use unmanagement as a management tool. So we could get hung up on the word management. As I said this morning, the outcomes should lead to a blended approach on the woodlands. So woodlands being managed for different reasons and how it's managed for different reasons. Yeah, so you could have woodlands managed for biodiversity being the ultimate reason. You could have ones being managed for commercial and timber production. You could have ones, for more tourism and destinations type of woodland. So yeah, it's an interesting thought. Like I say, and there is again, it's down to semantics in the word, but there is you could say that leaving woods unmanaged is a management practice. So it gets a bit I'm not going to get hung up on semantics.
And also we were asked this morning about our friends the grey squirrels. Now Ruth is asking, how will grey squirrels be dealt with to make sure we don't have a national forest of damaged, sick trees? That's a very good question.
Shall I answer? We have a grey squirrel, the Squirrel Management Action Plan. That is the policy for management of grey squirrel in Wales. So I would point people to look at that. I mean, that's a bigger forest policy question just in the round. So any new, obviously, woodland creation, we'd need to look at pest and disease in the round anyway. So
okay, and sorry, did anybody else want to? Or was that my feedback? Sorry. Sticking with species then, Heather is asking, how do we make sure any woodland creation schemes fund the gaps, in inverted commas, ensure that open spaces in woodland and forestry are maintained or created as they create fringes where most of the species are found? And Hannah is talking about pine martins everywhere.
John,
yeah.
pine marten's a good answer to grey squirrels, but only if you're a fan of pine martens rather than grey squirrels. The UK Forestry Standard, which is what we expect people to comply with when they plant woodland, demands a proportion of open space in any newly created woodland. And again, woodland management tends to create holes and gaps, as well as, you know, encourage some of the trees to grow much larger than they would otherwise. It's also important to recognise, I suppose, the ecotone between any woodland and surrounding land. So far better to have a kind of graded edge rather than an abrupt change from woodland to some other land use.
Okay, yeah, okay, I get that. We were asked in one of the breakout ones about what we'd like the National Forest to look in 40 years. Martin is asking, can we strengthen the protection of our ancient woodlands that have been in place for 400 years? People are very, very passionate, obviously, about ancient woodlands, yes?
Yeah, I believe they are. Erika's probably got something to say about that. I'm one of my kind of fringe interests is veteran trees. There's an ancient tree forum, which is a group of like-minded people all the way across the country who wander about in old woodland and wood pasture, talking about the violet click beetle and various other things. They are a scarce habitat and something that does deserve whatever protection we can provide, in my opinion.
Okay, Erika, let me come to you, and I got another question for you as well from our anonymous attendee.
No, nothing to add to John's. Just obviously the ancient woodland sites. We would hope we can integrate them within in whatever sort of what did I call them earlier? Spatial approaches. Yes, and the anonymous question. Which one was this?
Well, before coming to that, someone has asked me. We're talking about this. We're talking about the next 40 years, and we do this consultations at the moment. Do you have a date? Are you aiming for a specific date, a specific year? You're shaking your head there. No, this is obviously how long is it been?
And I just, everybody to be, this is year one of something that's a very, very long-term thing. We obviously will like to chunk things down into manageable chunks. So we're in the first 5 years of that long, very long-term vision, and it will need to flex, and it will need to change, and it will need to be robust, and it will need to take into account lots of things that are thrown at it across the years. And like I think somebody said earlier, it will still be growing when I'm in my care home, I'm not here anymore. So we really need to leave it, and we need to leave the framework around it in a way that it can flex and change, although it's still got that kind of steer that it started out with, and the vision that it started out with. So that's really, there is no end point. You don't really have an end point with trees until they kind of expire, but then you get new ones.
It's a long-term project, isn't it? Right. I got one for Lloyd, then I'll come. No, actually, do you know what? Let me stick with you, Erika, if you don't mind. The anonymous attendee. Right, bear with me. Could bespoke elements of the National Forest be implemented at different locations across Wales? For example, South Wales Valleys focuses on tackling air quality, reducing wildfires, biodiversity. Mid Wales may have a different focus. Yeah, I mean, obviously different parts of Wales will have different priorities and focuses, yes?
Absolutely. We touched on this a bit in the discussion group. We were talking about obviously a place-based approach, and we talked about right trees and right places. And when I was talking through the spatial approaches earlier, that there's obviously the area statement work that's happening with Natural Resources Wales and the local nature partnerships as well. And all of that information from communities feeding into what they want and need in their areas. And it won't necessarily be the same sort of Wrexham, across to the Llyn, down to Mid Wales, and like you say, Pembrokeshire, Swansea, Valleys, may all need different solutions, which is why the National Forest at the moment is very, very high level, and it allows that discussion to happen, and it's the place and the forum for it to happen. So,
okay, I'll stay with you if you don't mind again. Mike is asking, how does the National Forest fit in with the new Agri White Paper currently in consultation?
Oh, I think I might have to throw this one to John. Is that okay?
Yeah, go on. I was actually typing an answer to it as you spoke then, Chris. So yes, woodland, trees, agroforestry, important parts of support for agriculture going forwards, part of what we call sustainable land management. We will certainly be working with farmers to look at the ways in which we can integrate woodland into the wider agricultural landscape. But it's really up to the individual farmer to decide whether they determine that their woodland should be part of the national forest. It's not for us to push them in that direction. And I think that's an important point to make. So I hope that answers the question. I would hope that many farmers will, over time, think that they'd like to offer some of their woodlands up as national forest. But, you know, there will be people who don't, and it's just freedom of choice, really.
Yeah, that's actually one of the points we brought up in when I was facilitating the discussion group. It's all very well saying that everybody should be on board, but some people just will not want to be on board, and you've got to respect that, I suppose. Yeah, okay. So quick question for Lloyd then, and I'm going to ask every one of you then, what excites you about the National Forest? Okay, now let me just come to Lloyd first of all. Hi, a question for Lloyd regarding the modelling. Is the existing quality of the soil, sustainability of the suitability of the soil for particular uses an input into the model? And are changes in soil degradation and improvement going to be included in the modelled outputs?
Okay, thank you. We're very fortunate in ERAMP in that the kind of head of ERAMP in UKCH is someone called Professor Bridget Emmett, who is one of the leading experts in soil and everything soil. And so, of course, you know, quality of soil and the suitability of soil has been included in the model. We are also, another part of ERAMP, as well as the modelling, is undertaking a national field survey, which was meant to be done last year, but unfortunately due to COVID has been postponed to this year, and soil from across Wales will be taken a look at, and the results of that will be integrated into the model, of course. As well as that, one of the key components of modelling any forestry or woodland policies is to look at the suitability of that particular spatial area for different types of trees. And there are many reports on this. I'm just thinking of one done by Environmental Systems recently, looking at kind of the long-term climate effects and whether certain trees will be suitable for certain areas within that. And soil obviously comes into this in a big way. And so to answer the question, yes, soil and suitability of soil is included in the model.
Good. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you so much. Right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to end then, please, if you don't mind, with one line, if you like, or 2 lines. I'm going to start with John. What excites you most about the National Forest? These are questions from a few people, actually. What excites you most about the concept of this National Forest?
The opportunity to reconnect society and woodland, which is something that I think we've lost.
Excellent, good. Lloyd next, so I can finish off with the boss.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think as John said, the community aspect and being able to across all of Wales, being able to join in the National Forest in a nationwide approach. And I'm hoping that as it develops more and stuff, I can get out and help out some community groups as well. And I'm hoping everyone will, and it's just that, yeah, community approach.
Good, thank you, Lloyd. And Erika, yeah, you're all living this obviously on a daily basis, and it's your world. But what is the one thing you think that excites you most about this amazing project?
All of it. I'm not going to commit to one bit of it. I think it's really exciting. We have an amazing opportunity, and as John said, reconnecting forestry with society, communities, having a space to talk, having a space to bring all this together, and the National Forest being that catalyst and the glue it's not just about the trees, and I know that strapline is a little bit overused, but it's not. It's all the other things. Being able to create the People's Collection, being able to create the time capsule already. We've touched on things we never thought we were going to touch on. it isn't just a tree planting program. It's a lot more, and it's about people and what people want and the people of Wales, and it really is unique for it to be a whole nation and a national thing, and for the National Forest not to be a spatial element, for it to be across the whole of Wales is really unique. So we need to grab it, and we need to really to go with it. As somebody said earlier, get on with it. I think so we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erika, John and Lloyd. An amazing amount of questions and in the chat and Q&A. Felly diolch I chi gyd am gyfrannu ar cwestiynau yna, of course. Thank you so much. It really has been a lively discussion this evening. Let me quickly remind you of the other sessions we have for you tomorrow morning. Bwrw the session starting at 10 in the morning. We'll be focusing on the third of the key benefits as we look at the economic benefits of the National Forest, followed by trees and communities in the afternoon. I think that's 1 o'clock, or is it 12:30? I can't remember. 1 o'clock, I think it is, looking at the social benefits of the program. So we do it economic in the morning and social in the afternoon. Again, if you're unsure of the time, just go back to the event box main page. You get all the information there and register now. Somebody had asked earlier on if you could register. Yes, please do so if you haven't already done so. Right, cyn I ni fynd, ni am chwarae fideo bach I chi gan Iolo Williams. Just stay with us for a couple of minutes. It's perfect timing, actually. We'd like to play you a little video, one in Welsh, one in English, from the presenter and activist Iolo. Iolo Williams has got a message for us.
Yna rhywbeth hudolus am goedwig. Fel un gyda natur, maen nhw'n dda i'r enaid. Da ni ddim yn teimlo yn unig nag ar goll, ond yn gysylltiedig. Yn gysylltiedig â'n gwreiddiau Celtaidd a chwedlau o'r Mabinogi. Mae coedwigoedd yn cyfoethogi ein bywydau mewn cymaint o ffyrdd. Bydd Coedwig Genedlaethol Cymru yn cysylltu ein coetiroedd hynafol a newydd, yn dod â diwylliant ein gorffennol a'n presennol I fywyd, I ddathlu Cymru fel gwlad wedi ei chyfoethogi gan ein coetiroedd. Dim plannu coedwig ydy'r cynllun, ond plannu syniad a'i wylio'n tyfu dros genedlaethau. Mae o'n syniad fydd yn siapio ein gwydnwch fel cenedl yn y dyfodol, yn creu cryfder drwy gydbwysedd ac yn dylanwadu ein hamgylchedd, ein cynefin a'n bywydau, yn ddiwylliannol, yn economaidd ac yn gynaliadwy. Yn cynhyrchu ffyniant masnachol trwy greu ymwelwyr, diwydiant a swyddi. Byddwn yn adfer, gwella a chreu coetiroedd a chynefinoedd mewn ffordd gysylltiedig ar hyd a lled Cymru. Wrth gymryd yr agwedd y goeden iawn yn y lle iawn ochr yn ochr a safonau a chanllawiau coedwigaeth y Deyrnas Unedig, bydd ein Coedwig Genedlaethol yn sefydlu tirweddau a chynefinoedd cryf, cynaliadwy wedi gwreiddio'n gadarn I amddiffyn ein gwlad mewn nifer o ffyrdd o effeithiau newid yr hinsawdd I lifogydd. Mae ein Coedwig Genedlaethol yn ymwneud â mwy na choed yn unig. Mae'n ymwneud â chwarae rhan mewn tyfu a rhannu Cymru mewn dyfodol sy'n dduw ac yn ffynnu am genedlaethau I ddod. Eich Coedwig Genedlaethol chi ydy hon. Byddwch yn rhan ohoni. There's something magical about forests. At one with nature, they're good for our soul. We feel not alone, not lost, but connected. Connected to our Celtic past and tales from the Mabinogion. Forests enrich our lives in so many ways. The National Forest for Wales will connect our ancient and new woodlands, bringing our past and present culture to life, celebrating Wales as a land enriched by our woodlands. The plan isn't simply to plant a forest, it's to plant an idea and watch it grow for generations. It's an idea that will shape our future resilience as a nation, creating strength through balance and influencing our environment, our habitats and our lives, culturally, economically and sustainably. will generate commercial prosperity by creating visitors, industry and jobs. We will restore, enhance and create woodlands and habitats in a connected way across the length and breadth of Wales. Taking a right tree, right place approach alongside UK forestry standards and guidelines, our National Forest will establish strong, sustainable landscapes and habitats, firmly rooted to protect our country in a number of ways, from climate change effects to flooding. Our National Forest is about more than just trees. It's about playing a part in growing and sharing a future Wales that's alive and thriving for generations to come. This is your National Forest. Be part of it.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully you will be part of it. Thank you very, very much. Diolch Iolo. Again, thank you all for contributing and some wonderful messages in the chat. Yeah, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am gyfrannu. Thank you for the questions. Absolutely wonderful interactivity. Hopefully we'll see you at some of the sessions either tomorrow or Friday. So the first one again starts tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning with trees and the economy. Felly, diolch o galon i chi gyd. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Stay safe and hopefully see you tomorrow. Nos da chi.